What if the American dream wasn't stolen from us, but quietly sold by men in suits who smiled too wide and believed too hard? Welcome to Babbitt, the 1922 novel by Sinclair Lewis that dared to ask what happens when success becomes a religion. Lewis, a sharp-eyed satirist from Minnesota, was the first American ever to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, honored for his fearless portraits of ordinary life and the quiet tragedies hiding beneath its routines. In Babbitt, he gives us George F. Babbitt, a prosperous real estate broker from the fictional city of Zenith, a man who has everything he was told to want: a family, a fine house, a shiny car, and the respect of his peers. Yet behind that confident grin, he's restless, aching for something real in a world made of slogans and sales pitches. Lewis once described his hero's world as a place where every man is his own commercial. And in one of the book's most piercing lines, he writes, "He made nothing in particular, sold nothing in particular, and yet was a success." That single sentence, half joke, half epitaph, still rings true a century later. If you love literature that holds up a mirror to society with both humor and heartbreak, stay with me as we journey into Babbitt, the comedy and tragedy of being perfectly, painfully average. And before we dive in, remember to like this video, subscribe to the Echoes of Books channel, and consider supporting the project if you want to help keep these stories and the conversations they spark alive. George F. Babbitt wakes up in a comfortable house in Zenith, a fictional Midwestern city that could be anywhere in America. His alarm clock ticks with the precision of his life. He yawns, complains about the breakfast coffee, and checks the newspaper for business news. Outside, the hum of cars and factory whistles blends with the city's self-satisfied pulse. Zenith isn't just a setting, it's a state of mind. It's the modern world at full speed, a place where success is measured by how loudly you believe in it. Babbitt is 46, plump, polished, always on the move. He sells real estate, but what he's really selling is confidence, the idea that prosperity itself is proof of goodness. He's a member of every important club, booster association, and civic league. He can speak for hours about growth, progress, and moral uplift without ever saying a single true thing. He plays golf with businessmen, drives his car proudly through tidy suburbs, and spends his evenings talking about pep and punch and getting ahead. Yet even from the first pages, something feels slightly off. Lewis paints Babbitt with both irony and empathy. He's not a villain, he's a man who has built his life on what everyone else told him to value. Every morning, he stares at the bathroom mirror and sees not himself, but the face of the model citizen Zenith wants him to be. At home, Myra, his patient, gentle wife, tends to the rhythm of their domestic life. She isn't unhappy, exactly, but her quiet resignation speaks volumes. Their son Ted is restless, already pushing against the suffocating norms of middle-class decency. Their daughters glide through social obligations, learning early that appearances matter more than curiosity. The Babbitt family represents a kind of national portrait, comfortable, respectable, and utterly exhausted by their own good fortune. Then comes the fracture. His best friend, Paul Riesling, a sensitive man with a musician's soul, confides that his marriage is unbearable. When Paul snaps and commits an act of violence born from despair, Babbitt's carefully walled-in world begins to crack. The incident shakes him deeply. For the first time, the salesman's patter falters. He starts to see a city differently. Its bright storefronts now seem garish, its slogans hollow, its conversations mechanical. From this moment, Babbitt's story shifts from satire to something closer to tragedy. He begins a hesitant rebellion against his own life. He attends lectures on liberal politics, defends striking workers, and befriends people his old circle would despise, intellectuals, artists, even radicals. For a time, he feels almost alive. He meets Tanis Judique, a witty, free-spirited widow who represents everything Zenith isn't: spontaneity, honesty, warmth. Their affair feels less like lust than like an escape from airlessness itself. But freedom, as Lewis shows, is a hard thing to sustain when you've been trained to fear it. As soon Babbitt's rebellion loses its spark. The bohemians who once seemed thrilling now bore him. Their chaos feels as stifling as his old order. And when his wife falls ill, he abandons his experiments in freedom and returns home. The same clubs, the same committees, the same routines welcome him back as if nothing ever happened. Yet we, the readers, know everything has changed. Inside, he's no longer fooled. The novel closes quietly, without grand resolution. Babbitt helps his son Ted, who has just scandalized the family by marrying for love rather than status. For the first time, the father who once preached respectability speaks with tenderness. "I've never done a single thing I wanted to in my whole life, but I'm going to see that my son does." It's a sentence that lands softly but echoes for pages. Because by then, we understand, Babbitt isn't just the story of one man's midlife crisis. It's the story of modern life itself, how comfort can dull the soul, how rebellion can be co-opted, and how even failure can contain a flicker of grace. Lewis doesn't end with cynicism, but with compassion. The city still hums, the machines still run, but somewhere inside one man, a small light stays on. As the final line fades, we're left asking ourselves, was George Babbitt really foolish for returning to conformity, or heartbreakingly human for doing so? The clockwork life, structure and repetition. When you first read Babbitt, it almost feels slow. Nothing truly dramatic happens for pages. No car chases, no crimes, and no villains lurking in the dark. Just a man shaving, eating breakfast, driving to work, attending meetings. But that's exactly Sinclair Lewis's point. The monotony isn't filler, it's design. The structure of Babbitt works like a machine, a perfectly synchronized rhythm of modern life that keeps spinning even when no one is really steering. Every scene in Zenith feels like another tick of a clock. Lewis writes mornings and lunchtimes and board meetings with such routine precision that we begin to feel the weight of Babbitt's days pressing down on us. The repetition becomes a kind of quiet torture. And it's brilliant. Through that pattern, Lewis shows how modern success has turned into a ritual rather than a reward. Listen to how he describes Babbitt's morning routine. He sprang from bed, scowling at the chill of the room, and waved his arms up and down to expand his chest. He looked with affection at the good, solid furniture and the pictures of moose heads and waterfalls which expressed his own zest and the importance of himself. Everything about that moment sounds orderly, efficient, alive with self-approval. Yet beneath it all is something hollow, a man performing enthusiasm for the life he's already tired of living. Lewis's genius lies in that subtle repetition of tone. Every day begins the same way. Every paragraph almost duplicates the last. And just when you start to feel the rhythm, when the world seems locked in perfect mechanical balance, something small shifts. Paul's breakdown. A strange conversation with a liberal professor. A glimpse of the city skyline at dusk that feels lonely rather than proud. These moments don't explode, they disturb. They are the literary equivalent of a loose screw in the machine, a sound so faint you can almost ignore it. But once you notice, you can't unhear it. In this way, Babbitt's structure mirrors the emotional arc of its hero. The novel begins as a comedy of manners, but gradually darkens into something more like an existential meditation. The laughter turns uneasy. The rhythm we thought was humorous becomes claustrophobic. By the middle of the book, the reader feels the same itch Babbitt does, to break free, to escape the loop, to breathe outside the script. What's fascinating is that Lewis achieves this without moral sermons or dramatic speeches. He lets structure do the storytelling. The sheer repetition of everyday moments, luncheons and deals, parties, political rallies, becomes a moral argument in itself. It tells us that conformity is not a single choice, but 1,000 tiny ones repeated every day until they feel natural. Think of modern life for a second. We wake, scroll through screens, perform small acts of efficiency, congratulate ourselves for being productive. The rhythm of Babbitt's world isn't stuck in 1922. It's still humming inside our calendars and notifications. His city of Zenith might have been built from brick and smoke, but ours runs on pixels and metrics. The structure hasn't changed, only the soundtrack has. Lewis doesn't just describe the machine, he traps us inside it. When Babbitt's days start to blur, ours do too. We're made to feel the exhaustion of endless motion without meaning. That's why the rare moments of stillness, like when Babbitt watches a sunset and feels a queer tenderness for everything small and struggling, hit so hard. They feel miraculous precisely because the rest of his life is so controlled. There's an artistry to that pacing. Lewis understands that repetition is the most honest way to show spiritual stagnation. Babbitt doesn't fall apart in one grand scene, he erodes. His crisis is a slow leak, not an explosion. And the structure itself performs that erosion, page by page. If the novel had been more conventionally plotted, with big reversals, shocking twists, it would have betrayed its subject. Instead, Lewis keeps us in the grind, showing how monotony can be as dramatic as any tragedy. When routine becomes the villain, every breakfast table becomes a battlefield. By the time Babbitt starts to rebel, flirting with politics, art, and forbidden love, we feel the weight of what he's fighting against. His rebellion means more precisely because it's so small. It's not a war cry, it's a whisper in the middle of the machine. So when we talk about Babbitt's structure, we're not talking about plot in the usual sense. We're talking about rhythm, recurrence, and the courage to make boredom meaningful. Lewis takes what could have been dull, the daily life of an average man, and turns it into architecture. Every repetition is a beam holding up the novel's moral design. And if you listen closely, you'll notice the faint pulse beneath it all, the heartbeat of a man trying to wake up inside his own life. The language of selling, how words become chains. If the rhythm of Babbitt is mechanical, then its language is the oil that keeps the gears turning. Sinclair Lewis understood something that many writers of his time did not. The real poetry of modern life wasn't in nature or love, it was in advertising. The men of Zenith don't quote philosophers, they quote slogans. And in their world, language has stopped being a tool for truth. It's become a currency, a form of social glue, a weapon disguised as small talk. George F.E. Babbitt speaks in what Lewis called booster talk, a rolling stream of catchphrases, cliches, and pep words. He can make even the dullest subject sound like a campaign speech. When he praises a friend, it's not "you're kind" or "you're wise," it's "you've got punch" or "you're a real live wire." Every word buzzes with empty enthusiasm, designed to affirm, not to communicate. Through this language, Lewis builds a world where conversation itself is an advertisement. The way people speak becomes a performance of optimism, a constant public relations campaign for their own lives. Babbitt isn't lying when he speaks. He simply doesn't know how to speak honestly. His sentences are prepackaged thoughts, mass-produced and ready to sell. Listen to this line. He was nimble in the faith that the world was made for men who sell real estate, and that to sell real estate was the most gallant of all professions. That sentence sounds almost musical in its confidence. But what makes it sting is that it's written in the very idiom Lewis is mocking, an inflated style where even a sales pitch pretends to be a creed. This is what makes Babbitt such a modern book. Lewis foresaw a society where words no longer describe reality. They replace it. Today we call it spin, branding, networking. But Lewis saw it a century ago. He knew that once language becomes a sales tool, it starts to reshape the mind. When you repeat a slogan long enough, you start to believe it. Think about how this works in Babbitt's world. Words like success, progress, and pep are moral absolutes. They erase doubt. They make ambition sound like virtue and greed sound like patriotism. The boosters of Zenith have found a way to turn business vocabulary into theology. And once that happens, no one dares to ask what any of those words actually mean. Lewis uses dialogue to expose this hypnotic effect. Conversations in Zenith sound cheerful, even comic, but the more you hear them, the more chilling they become. It's a chorus of borrowed voices, everyone echoing everyone else. In one scene, Babbitt gushes at a business lunch. "We've got to stand together for the good of the community. What's good for business is good for everybody." The crowd nods approvingly. It's a perfect civic prayer. But underneath, you can feel Lewis smirking gently at the absurdity of it all. The beauty of this satire is how subtle it is. Lewis doesn't need to shout that these men are trapped. He lets their speech betray them. The more Babbitt talks, the less he actually says. His words are smooth, rounded, and frictionless, language without contact. It's the sound of thoughtlessness polished to a shine. There's a moment late in the novel when Babbitt tries to express something real to Tanis Judique, the woman who briefly liberates him from his routines. He begins a sentence. "I guess I've always felt, well, kind of restless," and then stops, unable to finish. His voice, trained for sales and speeches, fails him when he needs it most. The silence that follows is devastating. It's the first time his words don't come ready-made. And in that silence, for once, we glimpse the man beneath the salesman. Lewis is making a quiet argument about power. Whoever controls language controls thought. The slogans of Zenith aren't imposed by a dictator. They're freely chosen by people who want to belong. It's a self-inflicted obedience. In that sense, Babbitt isn't just social satire, it's linguistic prophecy. It warns that when communication becomes performance, sincerity becomes rebellion. You can almost hear echoes of this in our own world. Corporate mission statements that sound like moral manifestos, social media posts that feel more curated than heartfelt. The way we've all learned to sell our identities just to stay visible. We are fluent in the same dialect Babbitt spoke, only with shinier tools. Lewis's gift was to make us laugh at this absurdity before we realize we're laughing at ourselves. His humor is gentle but razor-edged. When Babbitt boasts about team spirit or community service, Lewis never mocks the words themselves. He mocks the hollowness behind them. He's not cynical, he's heartbroken. Because in a world where everything can be marketed, even friendship becomes a transaction. That's why the novel's dialogue feels both funny and tragic. It's comedy written in the language of self-delusion. Babbitt believes he's inspiring others when he's really drowning them in platitudes. And yet, here's the brilliance. Lewis never lets us despise him. Because who among us hasn't done the same? Who hasn't spoken a little too brightly, trying to sound confident when inside we were unsure? The language of Zenith isn't evil, it's just afraid. Afraid of silence, of depth, of truth. Afraid of saying, "I don't know." And that's what makes Babbitt timeless. It reminds us that sometimes the first act of rebellion isn't breaking a rule, it's speaking honestly, without a slogan to hide behind. Rebellion and its discontents, the psychology of the modern man. At some point in every comfortable life, a quiet question sneaks in. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or tragedy. It just sits there, whispering. Is this all? That whisper is the engine of Babbitt. George F. Babbitt's rebellion is not heroic or dramatic. It's fumbling, awkward, and deeply human. It begins the way most real revolutions do, not with a manifesto, but with fatigue. Lewis crafts this midlife crisis not as melodrama, but as slow suffocation. After years of selling, boasting, and belonging, Babbitt wakes one morning and realizes he doesn't recognize the man in the mirror. His rebellion starts small, a skeptical thought about a sermon, a quiet sympathy for workers striking in the street, a sense that his colleagues' laughter sounds forced. He begins to feel what he calls the malaise of the prosperous. What's striking is how Lewis refuses to romanticize this awakening. When Babbitt first flirts with liberal politics, he doesn't understand the ideas. He's simply drawn to their freshness, the way a man starved for color might fall in love with the first sunset he sees. He attends lectures, quotes phrases he doesn't fully grasp, and tells himself he's breaking free. But even as he rebels, he still plays the salesman. His new convictions are another form of self-promotion, another brand to wear. Then comes Tanis Judique, the widow whose presence awakens something deeper. She's spontaneous, emotional, and unashamed of it. With her, Babbitt feels, for the first time, seen. The affair isn't about lust or scandal. It's about connection, about touching the pulse of life he thought was lost. There's a fragile beauty in their time together. Lewis describes their evenings as a trembling peace, as if both know it cannot last. But freedom, for Babbitt, is not a destination, it's a shock to the system. Once he steps outside the safe boundaries of Zenith, he discovers that freedom is lonely, that authenticity offers no applause. His old friends begin to avoid him, his business suffers, and his sense of belonging disintegrates. The rebellion that once thrilled him now feels like exile. Here, Lewis reveals a truth that cuts far beyond its century, that conformity isn't just social pressure, it's emotional shelter. Babbitt isn't destroyed by society, he's seduced back into it. When Myra falls ill, he returns home, guilt-ridden but grateful for the familiar rhythms of care and responsibility. The act of tending to her becomes his surrender and his salvation. In a sense, Babbitt anticipates the existential fiction of the mid-20th century, the idea that meaning must be made, not inherited. Before Camus' Meursault or Sartre's Roquentin, there was Babbitt, a man facing the absurdity of his own well-organized life. His rebellion fails not because he lacks courage, but because his imagination is too colonized by the world he's trying to escape. He wants to be free, but can only picture freedom in the language of comfort. Lewis's portrayal of this failure is tender, not cruel. There's no cynicism in Babbitt's defeat, only recognition. When he returns to his clubs and committees, it isn't triumph, but fatigue. Yet that final moment with his son, Ted, when he says, "I've never done a single thing I wanted to in my whole life, but I'm going to see that my son does," redeems him in a quiet way. It's as if he finally understands that rebellion isn't about noise, but honesty. That line transforms Babbitt from caricature into man. After hundreds of pages of boasting and babble, he finally speaks from the soul. It's just one sentence, but it cuts deeper than all his speeches combined. For a man who's lived in the echo chamber of slogans, that simple confession is a kind of grace. Lewis captures what psychologists today might call cognitive dissonance, the painful gap between who we think we are and who we've become. Babbitt's rebellion is that gap widening until it almost breaks him. And though he retreats, that tension never disappears. The novel's final image of a man both defeated and faintly awake feels more honest than any happy ending could. Through Babbitt, Lewis sketches a universal pattern. We crave freedom, but also crave approval. We long to be authentic, but fear what authenticity costs. And maybe that's why Babbitt still feels modern. Because the question it asks, what does it mean to live a life of your own, is the one we keep asking, generation after generation, each time the world grows louder and our inner voice grows faint. Women and the Invisible Cage. When people talk about Babbitt, they often forget the women or treat them as background furniture in George's story. But Sinclair Lewis, with his wry and steady gaze, understood that women in Zenith live in their own kind of cage. Their lives are quieter, their rebellions smaller, but no less tragic. Through them, Lewis shows that the system that confines Babbitt also confines everyone around him, only in different ways and under gentler disguises. Myra Babbitt is perhaps the most overlooked character in the book. At first glance, she seems like the archetypal wife of the 1920s, loyal, practical, always smoothing over her husband's outbursts with patience and small smiles. She runs the home, hosts dinners, and keeps the domestic engine humming. But if you read closely, you see a woman who has traded her dreams for stability and who pays the quiet price of that bargain every day. Lewis describes her with a delicate irony. She admired George's success. He writes, and when he shouted at her, she was proud that she had a husband so important that he could shout. It's a devastating line, because it exposes how Myra has been trained to translate humiliation into pride. Her identity is entirely tethered to her husband's status. Her love for him isn't blind, it's conditioned. Myra's silence isn't emptiness, it's endurance. She represents the emotional foundation of Zenith's order, the invisible labor that keeps its men functional. The city's skyscrapers might symbolize progress, but its real scaffolding is made of women like her, those who absorb frustration, manage appearances, and keep the household moral machinery intact. Then there's Tanis Judique, Myra's opposite in almost every way. She's a widow, independent, unconventional. She smokes. No, she hosts late-night parties. She laughs too loudly for polite society. To Babbitt, she's intoxicating precisely because she doesn't fit the mold. She embodies everything he's been told to avoid, yet everything he secretly yearns for. Tanis isn't a romantic ideal, though. Lewis refuses to make her into a fantasy of liberation. She's lonely, often aimless, and surrounded by friends who talk about freedom but mostly drift through it. When Babbitt joins her circle of bohemians, he expects enlightenment but finds only another kind of emptiness. It's as if Lewis is saying, escape from conformity is not enough if you bring the same emptiness with you. What connects Myra and Tanis is that both are trapped, not by cruelty, but by expectation. Myra is imprisoned inside respectability. Tanis is imprisoned inside rebellion. They occupy opposite poles of womanhood, yet both are defined by the men who orbit them. Lewis seems to suggest that Zenith's real problem isn't just capitalism or conformity, it's the narrow imagination of gender itself. Even secondary characters reflect this theme. The gossiping wives at bridge parties, the clerks in Babbitt's office, the daughters rehearsing social charm. They all inhabit roles scripted for them long before they were born. The tragedy isn't that they accept these roles, but that they can't see any alternative. And that's what makes Lewis's portrayal so haunting. It's not satirical exaggeration, it's sociology written with a novelist's empathy. One of the most moving passages in the novel occurs when Myra falls ill near the end. Babbitt, who has spent so much time chasing excitement, suddenly finds himself tending to her bedside. The moment strips him of performance for the first time. He acts out of genuine care rather than duty. There's no grand reconciliation, just a quiet, human scene of love rediscovered through vulnerability. in that stillness, we realize that Myra, despite her silence, has always been the moral anchor of the story. Lewis didn't write feminist manifestos, but in his own restrained way, he exposed how patriarchy deforms everyone, men and women alike. The system that tells Babbitt to dominate also tells Myra to shrink, and both lose something precious in the process. Myra loses her voice. Babbitt loses his soul. When you look at it this way, Babbitt becomes not just a satire of business culture, but an early critique of gendered performance. The same way Babbitt sells his personality to clients, women in Zenith sell composure, charm, and patience as social currency. Everyone is marketing something. Everyone is exhausted, and that might be why the few moments of real tenderness, Myra's glance, Tanis's laughter, even a shared silence, feel almost sacred. They're flashes of honesty in a world built on role-playing. In those moments, Lewis lets us glimpse what freedom could mean. Not rebellion or success, but sincerity, the courage to exist without pretending. The Mirror and the Echo, Babbitt's legacy. Nearly a century has passed since Babbitt was published, yet its mirror still reflects us with unnerving clarity. George Freilich, Babbitt may have lived in a world of Rotary clubs, handshakes, and typewriters, but his descendants are everywhere, on LinkedIn, in open-plan offices, on Instagram, smiling through curated success. We have updated his vocabulary, swapped pep for hustle, and booster spirit for personal brand. But the music of self-promotion hasn't changed its tune. Sinclair Lewis wasn't merely writing about one salesman. He was diagnosing a culture addicted to approval, a civilization that measures identity by market value. When he created Zenith, he gave it the pulse of America's middle class, optimistic, industrious, and anxious. It was a city that believed progress could cure the soul. Yet every elevator that rose toward success carried the same hollow echo. What's the point of going up if there's nowhere higher to go? Lewis's satire was sharp enough to coin a new word. Babbitry entered the dictionary as shorthand for smug materialism and moral complacency. But what's often forgotten is that Lewis didn't hate Babbitt. He pitied him. He understood that beneath every overconfident man in a gray suit lies a frightened child begging to be told he's doing the right thing. That empathy is what makes the novel timeless. It laughs at Babbitt, but it never stops caring for him. Modern critics and artists have continued to hear the resonance. In the 1950s, novels like The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit and Revolutionary Road revisited Babbitt's malaise in the suburbs of post-war America. In the 1960s, as advertising became the new religion, Mad Men's Don Draper emerged as a darker, sleeker version of the same archetype, a man selling happiness he can't feel. Even in today's culture of digital hustle, Babbitt feels eerily predictive. The motivational speaker, the lifestyle influencer, the entrepreneur who documents every triumph online, all are modern Babbitts performing confidence while secretly haunted by emptiness. What makes Lewis's work so enduring is that it isn't just social criticism, it's emotional anthropology. He mapped the architecture of the modern soul, restless, performative, craving validation. He saw how language could shape morality, how conformity could disguise itself as virtue, how rebellion could be absorbed by the very system it resists. Every time a person feels guilty for resting or measures their worth in productivity, Lewis's ghost smiles knowingly from the margins. There's also a quieter legacy. For readers who come to Babbitt expecting a cruel satire, what they often find instead is compassion. The laughter fades into sadness, and the sadness into recognition. We don't despise Babbitt, because we've all been him at some point, worried about status, craving belonging. promising ourselves that the next achievement will finally make us whole. Lewis's influence stretches even into philosophy. Before existentialism became fashionable, he was already exploring the terror of meaninglessness in a prosperous society. Where Dostoevsky gave us men tormented by sin, Lewis gave us men tormented by comfort. It's a subtler kind of despair, the agony of having everything except purpose. If Babbitt were written today, Zenith would probably be a tech city. Babbitt would sell software instead of houses, attend leadership retreats instead of booster meetings, post his morning grind selfies with hashtags like #hashrise and shine. Yet his ache would be the same. His rebellion might take the form of deleting social media or moving to a cabin, but he would still return, drawn back by habit, fear, and love. That's what keeps the novel alive, its refusal to end in cynicism. Lewis doesn't offer an escape from the machine. He offers self-awareness inside it. The final pages suggest that even the smallest flicker of consciousness, a moment of honesty, a confession, a genuine act of care can be a form of salvation. For readers and writers alike, Babbitt remains a moral mirror. It reminds us that the real question isn't whether we've escaped Zenith, but whether Zenith has escaped us. Its laughter is the sound of a century recognizing itself again and again, in suburbs, in offices, on screens, in the language we use to sell our own lives. The hum beneath the hustle. By the time we close Babbitt, the noise of Zenith seems to fade, but the echo lingers. The meetings, the slogans, the bright storefronts, they're still there. But now we hear the hum beneath them, the quiet loneliness that Sinclair Lewis captured so well. His satire isn't cruel, it's compassionate. It reminds us that people often perform certainty not because they're arrogant, but because they're afraid. George F. Babbitt is no monster. He's an everyman. His story is the modern condition in miniature, a life built from good intentions, routine success, and small compromises that slowly pile into a wall between us and meaning. Lewis understood that the tragedy of comfort is that it dulls our desire to question it. We learn to call the cage home, and yet, in that final, tender scene with his son, Babbitt cracks the shell of his own conformity. I've never done a single thing I wanted to in my whole life, but I'm going to see that my son does. It's just one line, but it transforms the novel from satire into elegy. The man who once shouted through his days finally whispers something true. That whisper is what Lewis leaves us with, the possibility that awareness, however small, might still save us. Maybe freedom doesn't arrive with revolutions or reinventions. Maybe it begins with noticing, the moment you see the loop you've been living in, the script you've been reciting, the voice that isn't quite your own. A century later, Babbitt still asks the same quiet question. If the dream we've built no longer fits, do we have the courage to wake up? And now I want to turn that question to you. Have you ever caught yourself living by someone else's idea of success? What would it look like to rewrite that story? Even a little? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this reflection, please remember to like the video, subscribe to Echoes of Books, and share it with a friend who's been feeling the hum of routine lately. Your support keeps these conversations alive and helps us bring more forgotten classics back into the light.